The wind howled through the crooked streets of Dusty Hollow, kicking up clouds of grit that stung the eyes and tasted of despair. It was a town where dreams came to wither, where the promise of a new rail line had brought only empty hopes and shattered lives. The year was 1889, and though the frontier was bending to the will of progress, some places still clung to the raw, untamed heart of the West. I'd ridden into Dusty Hollow 2 days earlier, my saddlebags jingling with coin earned from a long cattle drive from the plains of Nebraska to the silver mines of Nevada. My name's Elias Kane, and at 35, I'd seen enough of the world's darkness to fill a dozen lifetimes. The war had stolen my innocence, and fever had taken my Sarah, leaving me with nothing but a trail of endless roads and the clink of my boots on warped saloon floors. The Rusty Spur Saloon crouched at the edge of Front Street like a battered beast, its wood warped and its windows clouded with years of dust and neglect. I'd taken a room above it, not for comfort, there was none to be had, but because it was the kind of place where a man's past was his own, and the weight of his coin was all that mattered. On my second night, as I sipped a glass of whiskey that burned like lamp oil, I heard a voice that stopped me cold. It sliced through the saloon's din, raucous laughter, a tinny piano, the clink of glasses, a voice high and desperate, raw with fear. "Please, I didn't mean to break it." The words came from a boy, somewhere out back in the shadowed alley where no honest soul lingered after dusk. I set my glass down, the whiskey forgotten, and felt a spark flare in my chest, one I hadn't known since Sarah's passing. It was the kind of instinct that makes a man act before he thinks, the kind that had once driven me to shield others from harm. Ignoring the stares of the saloon's rough crowd, I headed for the back door. The barkeep, a weathered man with hands like hammers and eyes that had seen too much, gave me a look. "Leave it be, stranger," he grunted, wiping a rag across a glass that'd never shine. "Some messes in this town ain't worth wading into." But I'd learned long ago that the messes worth avoiding were rarely the ones worth fixing. That boy's voice told me he needed someone, whether he knew it or not. I pushed through the door into the alley, where the stench of decay and despair hung heavy, like a fog you could taste. What I saw there will stay with me till my last breath. A boy, maybe 11 or 12, knelt in the dirt beside a shattered crate, his thin hands scrambling to gather broken bits of kindling. Tears streaked through the grime on his face, and his frame was so frail it seemed a strong wind might carry him away. His shirt, little more than tattered cloth, hung loose on his bony shoulders. But it wasn't his hunger or rags that chilled me, it was the man looming over him, a lit cigar glowing in his hand like a devil's ember. "Careless little rat," the man spat, his voice thick with liquor and venom. "Maybe a burn'll teach you to watch what you're doing with my things." He was a brute, broad as a barn door, with fists that looked like they'd crushed more than just dreams. His face was red with drink and a cruelty that fed on others' pain. Whispers in the saloon had mentioned a stepfather, a man who ruled with fear and took pleasure in it. "You gonna burn me again?" the boy whispered, his voice so soft it barely carried, heavy with a resignation no child should know. He'd stopped gathering the kindling, his eyes fixed on the man, empty of hope, as if this torment was just another day. Those words hit me like a bullet, and something inside me shifted, hardened, like raw or turning to iron. I stepped into the faint glow spilling from the saloon's rear window. "I don't reckon that's happening tonight," I said, my voice steady, the kind I'd used long ago to rally men in battle. My hand rested lightly on the grip of my revolver, no threat made, but none needed. The stepfather wheeled around, swaying as the whiskey in his blood warred with his rage. Up close, I saw the ruin of his face, broken veins, yellowed teeth, and the flicker of fear in his eyes when he realized I wasn't some trembling townsfolk. "This ain't your business, drifter," he snarled, but his voice wavered, betraying the coward beneath the bluster. "Burning kids," I said, stepping closer. "Where I'm from, we call that something else." The boy had scooted back against the wall, clutching the broken kindling like it was gold, his eyes wide but untrusting. The alley went quiet, save for the distant hum of the saloon and the boy's shallow breaths. The stepfather's hand twitched toward the blade at his hip, and I felt that old, cold calm settle over me, the kind that had carried me through Shiloh and Vicksburg, where hesitation meant death. "Walk away," he growled, but the words cracked, fear seeping through. "Can't," I said, and I meant it. Some moments change a man, and I'd crossed that line the second I heard the boy's voice. What happened next was over in seconds, though it felt like hours. The stepfather came at me with his knife, sloppy and drunk, all fury and no skill. I sidestepped, drove my fist into his gut, and watched him crumple, gasping like a fish on dry land. I plucked the knife from his hand and tossed it into the shadows. "Stay down," I said as he groaned in the dirt. "Touch him again and I'll be back. You won't like it." Only then did I turn to the boy. His eyes, too old for his young face, watched me like a cornered animal. He was beautiful in a way that only survivors are, fragile but unbroken, like grass pushing through scorched earth. "You hurt?" I asked, kneeling to his level, keeping my voice soft. He shook his head, still gripping the kindling, and I saw the truth of his life, sunken cheeks from too many missed meals, bruises on his arms from hands too heavy, and a flinch when I shifted closer. His hair, once a rich brown, was matted and dull, and his shirt, patched and oversized, likely a hand-me-down from a mother long gone, the only shield he'd ever had. "What's your name?" I asked, easing back on my hunches to seem less imposing. "Jasper," he whispered, his eyes darting toward his stepfather, who was struggling to his feet, his face twisted with a hatred that burned hotter than the cigar he'd dropped. "Well, Jasper, I'm Elias," I said, forcing a smile despite the anger coiling in my gut. "I reckon you and I ought to have a word." The stepfather spat into the dirt, blood trickling from his busted lip. "He's coming home with me," he growled, but his voice lacked the fire it had before. "Your responsibility?" I stood, letting my full 6'3" frame, hardened by years on the trail, serve as a reminder of our earlier clash. "Seems to me you lost any claim to that when you thought a cigar was a fit tool for teaching." He opened his mouth, then thought better of it when he saw my hand hover near my revolver. Pointing a trembling finger at Jasper, he snarled, "You'd best come home when you're ready to mind me." The threat hung hollow, the words of a man who knew he'd been bested. "And don't think this drifter's gonna stick around to save you forever." He staggered off into the shadows, and I watched until the darkness swallowed him. Only then did I turn back to Jasper, still pressed against the wall, clutching his broken kindling like it was all he had in the world. "Jasper," I said gently, "when'd you last eat something proper?" He studied me, wary as if waiting for the catch. After a long pause, he shrugged, a motion that tried to hide the weight of his hunger. "I get by," he mumbled, but his hollow cheeks told a different tale. "How about you join me for supper?" I offered. There's a boarding house up the street with decent grub, and I could use the company. For a moment, something like hope flickered in his eyes, but it dimmed just as fast. "He'll be mad if I don't go back," he said, though we both knew his stepfather's anger didn't need a reason. "Let me handle him," I said, offering my hand. "Tonight, you're getting a real meal and a proper bed. Tomorrow, we'll sort out what's next." Jasper stared at my hand, his face a battlefield of fear and longing. Trust didn't come easy to a boy who'd learned that those meant to care for him brought only pain. But hunger won out, and slowly he placed his small, dirt-crusted hand in mine. The contact hit me like a thunderclap, not love, but something fiercer, like a vow to protect what the world had tried to break. I knew then that my path had shifted, and there was no going back. "Come on," I said, guiding him toward the street. "Let's get you fed." As we walked to the boarding house, Jasper clutching his kindling like a lifeline, I felt the weight of purpose settle over me. For 5 years, I drifted through the West, a shadow chasing nothing, haunted by Sarah's absence. Now, in this forsaken town, I'd found something worth fighting for, not in wealth or fame, but in shielding a boy who needed someone to stand for him. The boarding house was run by a widow named Mrs. Callahan, who took one look at Jasper and set to work, piling a plate with hot cornbread and beans thick with bacon. I watched him eat, his focus that of a boy who knew what it was to go without, and a plan began to form in my mind. Risky, maybe reckless, but right. After years of wandering, doing what was right felt like finding solid ground. 3 days passed, and Dusty Hollow started to feel less like a way station and more like a place where fates were forged. I spent those days piecing together Jasper's story, and what I learned turned my blood to ice. His mother, Eliza, had died 8 months back, supposedly from a fever, but the townsfolk's hushed tones and averted glances hinted at darker truths. Eliza had been kind, Mrs. Callahan told me, always shielding her son from her husband's fists after he'd lost his job at the silver mine and drowned his failures in whiskey. Now Jasper lived in a shack at the edge of town, trapped with a man who saw him as a burden or a target when the liquor took hold. Jasper came to the boarding house each morning, supposedly to run errands for Mrs. Callahan, but I saw the truth in his careful steps, the way he startled at loud noises, and the shock in his eyes when anyone showed him kindness. On the 4th morning, as I sat on the porch with a tin cup of coffee, watching the sunrise bathe the desert hills in hues of amber and rose, Jasper approached me. For the first time, there was a spark in his eyes, not fear, but resolve. "Mr. Elias," he said, settling beside me with a quiet grace that echoed a mother I'd never known but could see in his every careful move. "I gotta tell you something." I set my coffee down and turned to him, giving him my full focus. Over the past few days, we'd built a quiet trust, born of shared silences and my growing need to protect this boy who'd carved a space in my heart I hadn't known was there. "I'm listening," I said, my voice steady, giving Jasper the space to speak. He stared out at the desert hills, their jagged outlines glowing under the rising sun, as if drawing strength from their quiet endurance. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but each word landed like a stone. "My ma didn't die of fever," he said. "He pushed her. I saw it." My coffee tin clattered to the porch, the sound lost in the rush of blood in my ears. My eyes locked on this boy, so small yet carrying a truth that could break a grown man. "Jasper," I started, but he shook his head, pressing on as if stopping would bury the words forever. "She was protecting me," he said, his voice cracking as tears carved fresh paths through the dirt on his face. "He came home drunk, raging about losing at cards. He was gonna hurt me, like he always did when the whiskey took him. Ma got in the way, and he shoved her down the steps." Without thinking, I pulled him close, feeling his frail frame tremble with grief too heavy for a child. Holding him, something inside me hardened, not just anger, but a cold, unyielding resolve. "Why didn't you tell the sheriff?" I asked when his sobs quieted. Jasper pulled back, his eyes sharp with a bitterness no boy should know. "Sheriff Tate's in his pocket, owes him from gambling debts. And who'd believe a kid like me over him?" His words cut deep, exposing the rot beneath Dusty Hollow's dusty surface. In places like this, justice was a game for those with money or power, and a boy like Jasper had neither. But I did. "Jasper," I said, taking his hands and meeting his gaze. "What if there was a way out? A way to leave this all behind and start fresh somewhere safe?" His eyes flickered with hope, but it was shadowed by a lifetime of broken promises. "What do you mean?" "I mean we go, together. Somewhere he can't touch you. Somewhere you can be free." For a moment, I saw the boy he might have been, bright, eager, full of dreams. But reality dragged him back. "He'd never let me go," he said. "He says I'm his till I'm grown, till he can sell me off or worse." The unspoken filled the air, and I felt a surge of rage at the future his stepfather had planned. "What if he couldn't follow us?" I asked, choosing my words carefully. "What if we made sure of it?" Jasper studied me, his young face too wise for his years. "You mean kill him?" His tone wasn't shocked, just practical, a boy forced to weigh choices no child should face. "I mean we keep you safe," I said. "Whatever it takes." We sat in silence, watching Dusty Hollow stir to life, merchants opening shops, men stumbling from saloons. The town looked peaceful, but I knew better. Places like this thrived on the weak, where law was a suggestion and cruelty a currency. "There's more," Jasper said suddenly, his voice barely audible. I leaned closer. "I'm sick," he whispered. "Been coughing blood for weeks. Can't run far without losing my breath. Mrs. Callahan thinks it's consumption." The word hit like a blade. Consumption. I'd watched it steal Sarah, seen it turn her strength to dust. Now it was after this boy, this brave soul who'd already lost so much. How long? I asked, dreading the answer. No doctor'll see me without coin, he said. Mrs. Callahan says her brother lasted a year, but maybe less for me. A year. Maybe less. The unfairness of it burned, but Jasper's steady gaze held no self-pity, only the courage of someone who'd faced death already. I thought of Sarah, how she'd lived her final days with purpose, squeezing joy from every moment. Jasper deserved that chance. Then we don't wait, I said, standing and offering my hand. Pack what you need. We're leaving tonight. Tonight? His eyes widened, fear and hope warring within them. But what about him? The sheriff? This place? None of that matters now, I said. What matters is you living whatever time you've got left somewhere safe, somewhere you can be a kid again. I'd been turning the idea over for days, but Jasper's confession sealed it. I had enough saved from years of hard trails to get him somewhere with clean air, maybe even a doctor who could ease his suffering. Not a cure, perhaps, but a chance to live with dignity. Where'd we go? He asked, a spark of belief igniting. California, I said. There's a place by the ocean, air so fresh it's like breathing life itself. Doctors there no lungs. We'll find good folks to take you in. And you? His question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on him, I hadn't thought beyond. I'll be nearby, I promised. Making sure you're safe. Jasper nodded, weighing the risks, the slim hope of escape. Okay, he said finally. But we gotta be smart. If he catches us. He won't, I said, projecting more certainty than I felt. That night, as Dusty Hollow sank into its usual haze of whiskey and cards, I readied our escape. Supplies were packed, food, water, blankets, and a bottle of cough syrup for Jasper. My horse was rested, and I'd secured a second through a quiet deal with the liveryman, who took my coin and kept his mouth shut. Jasper met me at a derelict barn outside town, clutching a small sack of belongings. In the moonlight, he looked ghostly, his thin frame almost translucent, but his eyes burned with determination. Ready? I asked, helping him onto his horse. He nodded, though fear lingered in his gaze. Leaving was a risk, and we both knew the stakes. Staying meant death, by his stepfather's hand or the disease in his lungs. We rode in silence, sticking to faint trails under a starlit sky. The desert was alive with hidden dangers. Coyotes, cliffs, the chance of pursuit. But my horse knew the way, and Jasper, despite his weakness, rode with a grit that humbled me. At a creek, we stopped to water the horses. Thank you, Jasper said, his voice soft but sure. For everything. Don't thank me yet, I said. Long road ahead. No, he insisted. I mean for seeing me. Ma used to make me feel like I mattered. After she was gone, nobody cared if I lived or died, except to yell about it. His words struck hard, and I blinked back tears, the first since Sarah's grave. This boy, starved for kindness, saw my small acts as something extraordinary. You matter, Jasper, I said, fierce. More than you know. As we readied to move on, a coughing fit seized him, blood speckling the ground. I held him steady, his body shaking with each labored breath, and I knew time was slipping away faster than I'd feared. I'm sorry, he gasped when it passed. Don't be, I said. Just hold on. We're getting you somewhere safe. I spoke with conviction, but in my heart, I knew the truth. Consumption was a thief, and no doctor could likely stop it. Still, I'd give Jasper what time he had left, free from fear, full of care. Sometimes, hope was the kindest lie. If hope was all I could give Jasper, I'd pour it out like water in the desert. We rode through the night, two shadows fleeing toward a fragile future, tied by fate and a shared defiance of the darkness behind us. Dusty Hollow and its cruelties, violence, betrayal, the predation of the weak, faded into the distance. Ahead lay a faint promise of something better, even if it came with its own uncertainties and inevitable sorrows. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet, I dared to believe we might make it. Jasper held up better than I'd feared, his small frame hunched but steady in the saddle. We'd covered good ground, but his cough had worsened, each rasp a reminder of the disease gnawing at him. Still, his eyes burned with a quiet fire, and I clung to that. By midday, the faint outline of Sagebrush Junction, a trading post halfway to California, appeared on the horizon. Jasper had fallen silent, swaying in his saddle, his breaths shallow and labored. Blood speckled the rag he pressed to his mouth, and I realized the night's ride might be costing him more than it gained. "We'll rest in Sagebrush," I said as we topped a rise overlooking the settlement. "Get you a bed and some warm food." He nodded, too weak to speak, and my heart sank at how fragile he looked. The consumption was advancing faster than I'd hoped, and I began to fear our escape from Dusty Hollow was stealing what little time he had left. Sagebrush Junction was a cluster of weathered buildings. A store, an inn, a livery, and a few shacks gathered around a muddy spring. It was a place for travelers to pass through unnoticed, perfect for us. I helped Jasper down from his horse, alarmed at how light he felt, like a bird with hollow bones. The innkeepers, an older couple named Carl and Marta Weiss, took one look at Jasper and sprang into action. Marta bustled off to make a broth she swore eased chest ailments, while Carl assured me their place was a haven for those who didn't want questions asked. As Jasper slept in a clean bed, I sat in the inn's cramped common room, wrestling with our next steps. California was still 200 miles away, and Jasper's condition was deteriorating fast. I wasn't sure he'd survive the journey, let alone long enough to reach the doctors I'd hoped could help. Carl joined me, carrying 2 mugs of bitter coffee, his face heavy with the weight of a man who'd seen too many tragedies. "The boy's bad off," he said, settling across from me. "Marta lost a sister to consumption years back. She knows the signs." I nodded, my throat tight. The responsibility for Jasper's life pressed down like a millstone, and I wondered if my plan to save him was just a fool's dream, chasing something I couldn't control. "There's more," Carl said, lowering his voice. "2 riders passed through at dawn, asking about a man and a boy traveling together. Flashed coin for answers." My blood ran cold. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing," he said firmly. "Marta and I don't hold with men who hunt children. But they'll be back, and they'll tear this place apart if they have to." I was caught in a vice. Jasper needed rest, maybe a doctor, but staying risked his stepfather and his hired men catching us. Pushing on could kill him faster. Either way, I was failing him. "How long do we have?" I asked. "Till sundown maybe," Carl said. "They rode east to check other towns, but they'll circle back." I made my choice then, not from hope but from a stubborn refusal to let Jasper die in fear. If his time was short, and it seemed it was, he deserved to spend it free, surrounded by kindness, not cowering from a monster. "Thank you," I told Carl. "We'll be gone within the hour." When I went to wake Jasper, he was already sitting up, staring out the window at the distant hills. In the soft light, he looked almost otherworldly, his frailty a stark contrast to the strength in his eyes. "We gotta go, don't we?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "How'd you know?" "Heard you talking downstairs." "He's coming, isn't he?" I couldn't lie to him. Jasper had seen too much for empty promises. "He's close," I admitted. "But we can still outrun him. We just keep moving." He turned to me, and I saw a weariness that aged him beyond his years. The innocence he should have had was long gone, replaced by a resilience that both broke my heart and filled me with awe. "Elias," he said, his voice steady despite his weakness, "I need you to know something. I'm dying." "Don't," I started, but he raised a trembling hand. "Let me say it. I'm dying and we both know it. The coughing's worse and I can't keep up like this." He paused, a wet cough shaking his frame. "But you gave me something I thought was gone." "What's that?" asked, my voice thick. "Hope," he said. "Not that I'll live forever, but that I'm worth something. That someone cares enough to try." Tears burned my eyes and I let them fall. This boy, who'd faced more pain than most could bear, was comforting me, easing the weight of our doomed journey. "You're worth everything, Jasper," I said. "More than you'll ever know." He smiled, A fleeting glimpse of the child he might have been in a kinder world. Then let's make what time I got left mean something. We left Sagebrush Junction as the sun dipped low, following a faint trail Carl had pointed out. It was longer but safer, avoiding the main roads where Jasper's stepfather might lie in wait. Jasper rode with effort, his strength fading, but he didn't complain. As we moved, he spoke of his mother, Eliza, her stories weaving a tapestry of love and loss. She told him of California's coast, where the air tasted of salt and wildflowers bloomed along the cliffs. She said we'd go there someday, he murmured. Just us. Maybe she knew, I said. Knew you'd make it there, even if she couldn't come along. He nodded, the thought seeming to ease him, and I held on to it, hoping it would carry him through. Do you think she sees us? Jasper asked, his voice a faint rasp as we rode through the night. Do you think she knows we're heading to her dream place? I wasn't much for faith, but watching this boy face his end with such quiet strength, I wanted to believe in something beyond this brutal world, a place where mothers could watch over their sons and find peace knowing they were safe. I think she knows, I said. And I think she's proud of you. We pressed on through the darkness, Jasper clinging to the saddle despite his fading strength. I kept a close eye on him, catching him when exhaustion threatened to pull him down. Each time, his frailty shocked me, his body wasting away under the disease's relentless grip. As dawn broke on what I sensed would be our last day together, we entered a valley that seemed to belong to another world. Wildflowers, poppies, bluebells, and desert marigolds carpeted the trail in bursts of color that stole my breath. The air carried a faint salt tang, a whisper of the ocean still miles away. This was the place Eliza had painted in her stories, and I understood why it had captured her heart. It's beautiful, Jasper whispered, tears glistening in his eyes, not from pain, but from awe at seeing his mother's dream come to life. We stopped by a cluster of cottonwood trees, and I laid blankets on the grass for him to rest. His cough was constant now, blood staining the cloth he pressed to his lips. Yet he seemed at peace, as if this valley fulfilled something deeper than survival. Elias, he said, his voice weak as I knelt beside him, these have been the best days I've ever had. Not because of where we are, but because of you. Jasper, I started, but he squeezed my hand, stopping me. You saved me, he said. Not from dying, nobody could do that. But from dying alone, unwanted. You made me feel like I mattered. I wanted to protest, to swear we'd reach California, find doctors, make miracles. But his eyes held the truth, and his ragged breaths told me our journey was ending here, in this valley of his mother's dreams. All I could do was ensure his final hours were wrapped in love, not fear. What can I do? I asked, helpless against the tide pulling him away. Tell me about Sarah, he said. Tell me about someone who was loved like my ma was. So I spoke of Sarah, her laugh that could chase away shadows, the way she'd hum while tending her herb garden, how she'd gentle a spooked horse with a soft word. I told of quiet nights by the fire, dreams we'd woven for a life cut short by the same disease now claiming Jasper. As I spoke, his breathing grew shallower, but his eyes stayed bright, drinking in every word. I realized I was giving him something sacred, proof that love existed, that it endured, leaving light even in its absence. She'd have liked you, I said as the sun climbed higher. Sarah always admired folks who kept fighting, no matter the odds. Jasper smiled, a faint curve that cost him dearly. Do you think she and Ma are together somewhere? Waiting for us? The question pierced me, but looking at this boy who'd faced so much with such grace, I found myself believing in something beyond. I think they are, I said, and they're proud of what we've done. As the sun sank, painting the sky in hues of coral and gold, Jasper's condition worsened. His breaths came fast and weak, and fear flickered in his eyes. I'm scared, he whispered, his first admission of weakness. I know, I said, pulling him close. But you're not alone. I'm here and I'm staying. Will you tell people about me? Make sure someone remembers. I'll tell them about the bravest boy I ever knew, I vowed. How you faced the worst with courage and heart. I'll tell them you mattered. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, I thought he was gone. But then, in a voice soft as a breeze, he said, "Thank for caring, for trying, for making me feel worth saving." Those were his final words. He slipped away as the first stars pierced the twilight, peaceful in the valley his mother had dreamed of, held by someone who loved him. I stayed through the night, unwilling to let him go alone. At dawn, I buried him beneath the cottonwoods, in soil rich and soft, fit for a soul so precious. On a simple stone, I carved, "Jasper, beloved son, brave heart, forever remembered." I never went back to Dusty Hollow. It held nothing but memories of cruelty and a man whose evil had gone unchecked. Instead, I bought a patch of land in that valley, near Jasper's grave, and built a cabin to keep him company. Years passed, and the frontier softened. Towns grew, law took root, and the West's wild edge dulled. I never remarried, never had children, but purpose found me. Word spread of the man in the valley who helped those in need, especially children fleeing shadows like Jasper's. I guided dozens to safety, finding them homes where they were loved as every child should be. Each one reminded me of Jasper, of the lesson he taught, that the smallest victories, saving one soul, mattered more than empires or riches. He changed me not with grand gestures, but by trusting me with his dreams, by letting me matter to him. I grew old in that valley, watching wildflowers bloom each spring where we'd spent our last day. When my time came, I faced it without fear, knowing Jasper, Sarah, and Eliza waited beyond, in a place where love outshone all darkness. My cabin still stands, cared for by others who honor those who came before. Beneath the cottonwoods, Jasper's stone endures, a testament to a boy whose story touched lives. He taught me that the greatest gift is to be remembered, to know your life mattered, that love can thrive even in the bleakest times. Jasper was just a boy, dying of consumption in a world that showed him little mercy. But he changed everything, for me, and for countless others who needed to know they were worth saving. His legacy lives in every act of kindness, every child shielded from harm, every moment someone chooses love over indifference. That is the story of Jasper, the orphan boy who asked if his stepfather would burn him again, and the cowboy who wept at the honor of knowing such courage. It's a tale of love and loss, hope and heartbreak, but above all, it's the truth that every life has worth, and every soul deserves to be remembered.